In a sleepy town where nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary, 8-year-old Ben Calloway vanished one morning, gone without a trace. His disappearance would shatter his family and leave the community desperate for answers. The investigation would go cold. For 20 long years, Ben was lost. But then, an unexpected call came in, and everything changed. Ben had been found. But the mystery that surrounded his disappearance was far deeper than anyone could have imagined. This is the chilling true crime story of the boy who disappeared at school and was found 20 years later. It was an ordinary September morning in the quiet town of Maple Creek. The sun rose lazily over the sleepy streets, casting long shadows as children hurried to school, backpacks bouncing with each step. There was a crispness in the air, a hint of fall as the leaves began to turn. But for one family, that day would never be ordinary. Ben Calloway, a bright-eyed 8-year-old with unruly brown hair and a smile that could light up any room, had just finished his breakfast. He kissed his mother goodbye and headed out the door of their modest home, waving at his father who was mowing the lawn. It was a routine morning for Ben, just like any other. By 8:30 a.m., Ben had reached Maple Creek Elementary, a school that was as familiar to him as his own backyard. He walked to his classroom with his best friend, Jack, as they joked about the upcoming math test. They parted ways at the door to their classrooms, and that was the last time anyone saw Ben. The bell rang for recess, and the children flooded the playground, their laughter echoing through the schoolyard. But when the bell rang again, signaling the end of recess, all the children lined up and entered the building, except for Ben. His teacher, Mrs. Collins, called his name, but there was no response. She thought he might have been playing with Jack or stopped at the water fountain. As the minutes ticked by, Mrs. Collins grew uneasy. She checked the school grounds, the bathrooms, and even the nearby park where the kids liked to play after school. There was no sign of Ben. The following morning, the school day resumed, and there was still no sign of Ben. His mother, Linda, waited at the school gates, her heart pounding with each passing minute. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. By noon, the school had notified the local authorities, and the search for Ben was launched. Officers combed the area, checking every classroom, every corner of the schoolyard. But there was no sign of the missing boy. The search soon extended to the surrounding woods, the nearby park, and the streets of Maple Creek. Still, no clues surfaced. The police did everything they could, but Ben had vanished without a trace. The school was locked down, and every teacher and student was questioned, but no one knew where he had gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, no leads. The case was incomprehensible. Linda and Tom Calloway sat in silence, unable to comprehend what was happening. Their son, their little boy, was out there somewhere, lost, and they had no idea where to begin looking. By the time the sun had set that evening, the once vibrant town of Maple Creek had gone dark. The search for Ben continued throughout the night, with volunteers and officers canvassing every inch of the town. But still, there was no sign of the missing boy. As the days went by, the town of Maple Creek began to rally around the Calloway family. Flyers were posted everywhere. News outlets covered the story. But as the days turned into weeks, the police had nothing new to go on. The case had gone cold. It was as if Ben had simply vanished from existence. The disappearance of Ben Calloway shook Maple Creek to its core. A missing child was every parent's nightmare, and now that nightmare had become a reality. As dusk fell that first day, officers fanned out across the town. Flashlights pierced the darkness, dogs barked in the distance, and the sound of searchers calling Ben's name echoed into the night. The once quiet town had transformed into a scene of desperation. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers arrived to help, forming long human chains as they combed through fields, riversides, and alleyways. Each step was careful, each face strained with hope and fear. Despite the urgency, no clues surfaced. The woods behind the school were searched multiple times, The creek that snaked through Maple Creek was dragged, but yielded nothing. The silence of the night only amplified the dread. At the Calloway home, Linda sat trembling on the couch while Tom paced the living room, unable to mask his frustration and grief. Every knock at the door sent a wave of hope rushing through her, only to collapse again when it wasn't the news she prayed for. Detective Richard Harrison took command of the investigation. He was a man who had seen it all: robberies, assaults, even a few murders, but nothing cut through him like a missing child. He organized the search with precision, charting maps, questioning every teacher, every friend, every passerby. Yet, despite his efforts, the trail was barren. By the second day, flyers with Ben's face were stapled to lampposts, grocery store boards, and bus stops. His smile, frozen in time, stared back at the community with haunting innocence. Missing in bold letters screamed from every corner. Reporters arrived, cameras rolling, microphones in hand. Maple Creek was no longer just a small town. It had become the site of a story that would grip the region. Parents kept their children close, teachers walked students to cars, and whispers of abduction spread like wildfire. By the end of the week, tension boiled over. Rumors swirled. Some said a stranger's car was seen by the playground. Others swore they noticed a man watching from the woods. Each lead sent police scrambling, but each turned up empty. Still, no trace of Ben emerged. The search had been exhaustive, but it was as though the boy had walked off the face of the earth. Maple Creek was left not just with fear, but with silence. The weeks turned into months, and the months into years. But the mystery of Ben Calloway's disappearance never left Maple Creek. His absence was like a wound that refused to heal, haunting his family and shadowing the entire community. At first, the flyers were everywhere. His bright smile looked back from grocery store windows, church bulletin boards, and the post office wall. But as the years rolled on, the edges of those flyers grew tattered, faded by sun and rain, and eventually replaced by newer posters for yard sales, concerts, and lost pets. Inside the Calloway home, life had changed forever. Linda kept Ben's room untouched. His toys still lined the shelves, his bed neatly made. Every year on his birthday, she baked a cake and set it by the window, hoping against reason that he would come home. Tom, Ben's father, grieved differently. His sorrow turned inward, manifesting as anger. He became distant, burying himself in work. Conversations with Linda grew strained, their marriage fraying under the weight of unanswered questions. For Detective Richard Harrison, the case became a shadow he couldn't escape. He revisited it countless times over the years, searching for the detail he might have missed. He filed Ben's name under cold case, but in his heart, it was unfinished business. Meanwhile, the town itself began to move forward. Children who had once shared classrooms with Ben grew up, graduated, and left for college. The story of his disappearance became something whispered about at high school reunions, a cautionary tale parents told their kids. But for those who had lived it, the memory never fully faded. Local newspapers occasionally ran anniversary pieces. 10 years since Maple Creek boy vanished, but each article ended the same. No answers, no closure. With time, new mysteries and tragedies took the headlines. But for Linda, every anniversary was agony. By 2010, nearly 15 years after Ben vanished, most of Maple Creek had stopped talking about him. But Linda never stopped waiting. Some nights, she would leave the porch light on, whispering into the dark, "Come home, Ben. Please come home." For Linda and Tom, the years were measured not in birthdays or anniversaries, but in unanswered prayers. And though the world moved on, the boy who had vanished from school still held them prisoner. It was a rainy Thursday morning in 2016 when Linda's phone rang. She had just finished her routine, making coffee and thinking about Ben. For 20 years, she had lived with the constant ache of not knowing where he was. The phone call came at 9:32 a.m., an hour after she had set Ben's favorite chair by the kitchen table. as she did every year on his birthday. A small ritual to keep hope alive. "Mrs. Calloway, we've found your son," Detective Grace Miller said. The words hit Linda like a punch, and she dropped the phone, her heart racing. "Ben, alive? Are you there?" The detective's voice brought her back to reality. Linda could barely respond, her mind spinning with disbelief. "I'll be there as soon as I can," she whispered and hung up. She stumbled to the door, her mind reeling. How had they found him? What had happened to him all these years? Linda drove to Jackson County, each mile feeling like a lifetime. Tom was at work, and she couldn't wait to tell him. She needed to see Ben with her own eyes. When she arrived at the sheriff's department, Detective Miller greeted her and explained, "Your son's been living under a different name. It's time for you to meet him." Ben was sitting in a small room, his back turned. When he turned around, Linda's breath caught. He was no longer the boy she remembered, but a man, his face older, guarded. "Ben!" Linda's voice cracked as she stepped closer. He looked at her, his face softening, but there was still hesitation in his eyes. "Hi, Mom. It's been a long time." Linda took a step forward, but he flinched, his body tensing. She stopped, her heart breaking. The boy she once knew was distant, a stranger. "Ben, where have you been? Why did you leave?" Linda's voice trembled. Ben lowered his gaze. "I didn't leave. I had to go. I was forced to. I didn't know who to trust. The people who took me, they made me believe coming back would hurt you, that you were better off without me." Linda's heart shattered. She wanted to hold him, but fear gripped her. What had happened? Why hadn't he come back sooner? Image prompt 6. A close-up of Linda's hand, trembling as it hovers just inches from Ben, the emotional distance between them heavy. "I couldn't fix it," Ben whispered. "I wasn't just taken. I was part of something bigger." "I couldn't fix it," Ben whispered. "I wasn't just taken. I was part of something bigger." Linda's tears finally fell, but she didn't move. This reunion, this moment was nothing like what she had imagined. She wanted answers, but all she had was more questions. Ben's revelation hung in the air, thick with unspoken truths. He wasn't just a boy who had disappeared. He was a man whose life had been controlled, manipulated, and shaped by forces far beyond his understanding. Linda and Tom sat in stunned silence, trying to process the gravity of what their son had just shared. "I wasn't just taken," Ben repeated quietly, his voice barely audible. "I was part of something bigger. They made me believe that I had to disappear, that I had no choice." Linda leaned forward, her heart pounding. "Who are they, Ben? Who did this to you?" Ben's eyes flickered with hesitation. He looked down at his hands, his fingers trembling. "I don't know exactly, but I know they were watching me, watching everything I did. They told me it was for my own safety, but it wasn't." Linda reached out to him, but Ben recoiled slightly. It wasn't that he didn't want to connect with her. It was that, after all these years, the emotional barriers between them were too high to overcome in an instant. The years apart had created a distance that no reunion could immediately erase. "We need to understand, Ben. What happened to you?" Tom's voice was hoarse, thick with emotion. He wasn't angry, just desperate. Desperate to know why his son had been taken, and why he had never come home. Ben inhaled deeply, then exhaled slowly. His gaze wandered to the window, as though seeking the courage to share what he knew. "I was kept in different places," Ben began. "Different houses, different towns. I wasn't allowed to leave. They told me I couldn't go back to you, that I was in danger. They said if I came home, they'd hurt you." Tom and Linda exchanged a glance, their faces filled with a mix of disbelief and anguish. What could possibly have been so dangerous that Ben had to disappear without a trace? The pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place, but they weren't fitting together. "So you were held against your will?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. Ben nodded, his expression distant. "I didn't have a choice. I wasn't allowed to contact you to tell you where I was. I thought I was protecting you, keeping you safe. But I was just a kid. I didn't know any better." "Ben," Tom's voice cracked as he leaned forward. "You were just a kid. You didn't have to do this alone. We could have helped you. We would have found a way." "I thought they were keeping me safe," Ben repeated. "But they weren't. I wasn't free. I never was." Linda wiped her eyes, the tears she had been holding back now flowing freely. She wanted to reach out to Ben, to hold him and make all the pain disappear. But the years between them were more than just time. They were memories, lost, broken, and now too complicated to undo. "You said you were part of something bigger," Tom said. "What does that mean? Who else was involved?" Ben's eyes shifted nervously. He seemed to weigh his words carefully. "I wasn't the only one. There were others, kids like me. They were taken, too. I was kept in places where I saw things I can't forget." Linda's heart sank. "What do you mean? Who else? How many?" Ben took a deep breath. "I don't know. I was moved around too much. But I saw other kids. They were all kept in the same places, like me. But I didn't get to talk to them. I wasn't allowed." The words sent a chill through the room. Children taken and hidden just like Ben. And for what purpose? Who was behind this? "I need to know who they were." "Ben," Linda said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "I need to know who took you." Ben shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't know their names. I was too young to understand. They were always careful to stay out of sight. They never told me who they were. But I saw enough to know they weren't just normal people. They were part of something much bigger." "I don't know why they chose me," Ben continued, "but I knew it wasn't just for money or ransom. It was bigger than that. It was like I was part of something they were doing with other kids. I just don't know what." Linda and Tom sat in stunned silence. They had known that Ben's disappearance had to have been part of something more sinister, but hearing it from his lips was another level of horror they hadn't been prepared for. "How do we stop this?" Tom asked quietly, a note of determination in his voice. "I don't know," Ben replied, his voice breaking. "I never got close enough to find out. I was too scared to ask." "I don't want to be a part of this anymore," Ben said, his voice gaining strength. "I don't want to keep running. I need to find out the truth, even if it means facing the people who kept me." Linda reached across the table, her hand finally resting on his. "You don't have to do this alone, Ben. We're here now, and we'll find out the truth together." The moment Ben had revealed the existence of others, children who had been taken like him, a new fire lit within Linda and Tom. It wasn't just about finding their son anymore. Now it was about uncovering a network, a sinister force that had manipulated and harmed countless innocent lives. And it was clear. The time had come to confront whatever darkness Ben had been part of. "I need to know who did this," Linda said quietly, but firmly, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "We're going after them." Ben's eyes were wide, filled with fear and uncertainty. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face the truth, let alone confront the people who had held him captive for so long. But he knew his parents had a right to know. They had waited 20 years for answers, and now that they had him back, he couldn't hold back any longer. "I've been running from this for so long," Ben whispered, his hands shaking as he gripped the table in front of him. "But I can't keep running. I need to help. You don't deserve to live with this uncertainty." Linda leaned forward, her eyes never leaving his. "We'll do this together. You don't have to face it alone." The room was thick with tension. Linda's heart raced, and Tom sat back in his chair, his fists clenched, his jaw set with determination. They had already lost too much. They weren't about to lose this battle. Detective Miller had arranged a meeting with the FBI, who had been quietly investigating a string of missing children's cases across the state. They had uncovered something chilling, a hidden network of individuals involved in the trafficking and manipulation of children, working under the radar for decades. Linda, Tom, and Ben walked into the office, where FBI agents gathered around a large table. On the map, the names of missing children, some from nearby towns, others from across the state, were marked with small red pins. The connection between them was clear, but the truth behind their disappearances was still a dark mystery. "This is bigger than we thought," said Agent Harris, a senior investigator. "These kids weren't just taken. They were used, manipulated into a network of people we've been tracking for years. They're not just victims," Harris continued. "They're pawns in something much bigger, and we think we've found the group behind it all." Linda's breath caught in her throat. The words, so chilling, were like a punch to her gut. "So, who are they? Who's behind all of this?" Harris glanced at the others in the room before turning back to Linda. "We believe a group of high-level officials, both in the public and private sectors, have been involved. We've got a list of names, but they've been covering their tracks for years. We need your son's help to connect the dots. He's the only one who can tell us what really happened." Ben's eyes widened as the truth settled in. He had been part of something much darker than he had ever realized. But the thought of helping expose it, helping to free the other children, gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since the day he disappeared. "I'll help," Ben said, his voice steady. "I don't know everything, but I remember enough. I can help you find them." The investigation ramped up, with Ben at the center, helping to piece together the years of hidden information. But as they delved deeper, they uncovered more unsettling truths. This network wasn't just about taking kids, it was about control, about using children as pawns in a game that reached far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Ben spent hours recounting every detail he could remember. He spoke of his captors, of the people who had kept him hidden, of the strange locations he had been moved to. As he shared the fragments of his memories, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The deeper they went, the more horrifying it became. The people involved were high-ranking, powerful figures with deep ties to politics, law enforcement, and business. They had been operating under the radar, covering their tracks by using their influence to manipulate the system. "We need to act fast," Agent Harris said, his voice tight. "If we don't move now, they'll cover their tracks again. We can't let this slip through our fingers." It was time for action. They had the evidence, the connections, and the will to stop them. But Linda and Tom knew the risks. This wasn't just about their son anymore. It was about saving countless others who had been lost to this horrific network. As the FBI moved in to take down the perpetrators, Linda stayed close to Ben, her protective instincts kicking in. For years, she had thought she was helpless in the face of Ben's disappearance. But now, she was part of something bigger, a movement that would finally put an end to the horror. The final confrontation came swiftly. The FBI raided multiple locations across the city, arresting several individuals linked to the network. The sting operation was a success, but the consequences were far-reaching. The people behind the operation were powerful, and their influence was wide. But for the first time in 20 years, the truth was exposed, and the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Ben was no longer just a victim, he was a survivor, and with the support of his family, he helped bring down a dangerous criminal network. But there was still much to be done. The damage they had caused could never be undone, but for the first time, there was hope. If you were moved by this story and want to hear more real-life true crime cases that will keep you at the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another mystery. Join us as we uncover the truth, piece by piece. Share this story with others who deserve to know what really happened. The truth is out there, and we're just getting started.